Hello everybody, and let's talk about Class B subnetting. So if you remember from the last video, in Class C, once we figure out the range, we start at 0 and then we work on the left side and we just fill out a range chart. So we start at 0, we add the range, we add the range, we add the range, and then we subtract 1 from this side. So 96 minus 1 is 95, and then 64 minus 1 is 63, then 32 minus 1 is 32 or 31. And then we just fill in the middle. So we add 1 to 0, so 0 plus 1, and then 31 minus 1. So we add 1 from the left, we subtract 1 from the right, then we fill in the middle, and we're all set. Now, it's the exact same thing in a Class B, except we're dealing with the third octet. So it looks like this. So we have, in this case, the range is 4, so we have 60, then 64, then theoretically 68, 72, and then if it's 64, we go down to 63, and then we just fill in the middle. So the very first IP would be, or the first usable, or the first number is 0, and then we just add 1, and then if it's 255, we subtract 1, so 254. So let's work one, and I'll show you an example. So we have 172.16.60.0 with a /22 subnet mask. So just by looking at that, we know right away it's a Class B because that first octet fits in the Class B range. And we know Class B has a default subnet mask of 16. So if we start going through our formulas, so first we want to do the number of networks. So if we have a /22 subnet mask, but the default is a /16, then they've added 6 ones to the default subnet mask. So we apply our network formula, 2 to the x, and x is the number of ones added to the subnet mask, so it's 6. So 2 to the 6 equals 64, so we could have 64 networks if this was our IP address. All right, so then we go on to the host portion. So if we have a mask of 22, and there's always 32 bits in a subnet mask, and 32 of them are 1s, then 10 of them have to be 0s. All right, so then we use the formula, 2 to the 10 minus 2. This gives us 1,022 usable IP addresses for each network. And then here's where things can get a bit different. When you're figuring out the range, there are a couple different methods. That's kind of the neat thing about subnetting is there's a lot of different ways you can do the math. So in this first method, we're only going to focus on the third octet because that's where things change. So wherever you see the first 0 in the subnet mask, that's the octet you're going to be changing. So in this case, our first 0 was in the third octet. So if I have 172.16.60.0 and the subnet mask is 255.255.252, the first 0 is in the third octet. So we're only going to be dealing in the third octet. So if I only use the third octet and I remove everything else, then we have a range of 4. And we get that using the range formula, which is 2 to the number of 0s in the subnet mask. And if we're only looking at the third octet, there are 2 zeros, so 2 to the 2 is 4. So that's how I got the range. So if we start at 60, if our IP address starts at 60, our ranges would be 60, 64, 68, etc. So I lost all track of thought where I was at. So our ranges are 60, 64, and 68. Since we're only dealing with the third octet, it just becomes like this, 60, 64, 68. And then we 0 and 1, the first two numbers in an octet, and then 255 and 254, the last 2 numbers in an octet. All right, now the second way you could do that is if we know the host formula was 2 to the 10 minus 2, we could just take our range formula 2 to the 10, and that gives us 1024. So now we have a range of 1024. We know each octet can have 256 values, 0 through 255. So if we divide the 1024 by 256, we get 4. So that's another way to get your range. So you can use any method that works for you, whichever method makes the most sense for you. All right, so let's work another one. So what's going to be my broadcast if my IP address is 172.16.17.4 and my subnet mask is 255.255.254? So again, what do we know right away? We know it's a Class B, and we know the mask is a /23. All right, so we know a Class B, the default subnet mask is /16. So how many ones did we add? Well, if we started at 16 and we ended at 23, we added 7 ones. So 2 to the 7 gives us 128, so this would give us 128 different networks. Then if we apply the host formula, we know that the mask is, remember, a subnet mask is always 32 bits, and an IPv4 address is always 32 bits. And if we had a /23, then that means 23 of them are 1s. So if 23 are 1s and there's 32 bits total, then 9 of them have to be 0s. So in this case, 2 to the 9 minus 2 gives us 510. So then you can just figure out which range formula works best for you. So in this one, I'm using the first formula. So again, we're dealing with the third octet. And remember, in the first one, we kind of skip the fourth octet. So we see the 0 starting the third. So we're going to do a range formula based only on the third octet. So there's only one 0, so it's 2 to the 1. So with 2 to the 1, I can then have a range of 2. So I would have 0, 2, 4, 8, 10, 12. You get the idea. But my third octet was 17, so where does that fit in? Well, it fits in between the 16 and the 18. So if I do my range chart, 16, 18, 20, we know we're going to be somewhere in here. Then we fill in the right side. And then, ta-da, we pop in the middle, and that's where our address is going to fit in. So our broadcast address is 172.16.17.255, and that's where that address would fill. Remember, we were trying to figure out 172.16.17.4, and that fits in here. 172.16.17.4 would fit in this range. All right, so that's working out with the first method. So if we try the second method, so if our host formula was 2 to the 9 minus 2 gives us 510, our range would be 2 to the 9, when we just skip the minus 2, so it would be 512. So if we have 256 total combinations of a binary octet, and we divide that into 512, we get a range of 2. So it's the exact same thing. We're still getting that range of 2, and we know we're still focusing on the third octet. But now here's where things get really weird. What if we're in a Class B, but we're actually working in the fourth octet? Now, you don't see this very often, and you probably will not see an exam question or anything like this on the CCNA. And again, you only see this if you need a lot of small networks. So think about a franchisee that has, 500 McDonald's stores, or 500 Verizon stores. A Verizon store only has a few PCs and then things that need IP addresses. A McDonald's only needs one public IP address, but it would need a few internal IP addresses for the different cash registers and stuff. So the same formula applies. We know it's a Class B, and a Class B has a default subnet mask of 16. So in this case, we're working the network formula first. So we know that they added 9 ones. Remember, we start with a default of 16, but they've turned it to 25 here. And so we know they've added 9 ones. So if we work through this, 2 to the 9 equals 512. So we can have 512 networks. Now hosts, if there's 32 bits in a subnet mask and 25 are 1s, then 7 of them have to be 0s. So 2 to the 7 minus 2 gives me 126. So we can have 126 usable IP addresses on each network. And then here's where it gets weird. So I picked a bad address to give you guys. Our host formula was 2 to the 7 minus 2, so our range is 128. So the first 0 was in the fourth octet, so we're going to apply our range in the fourth octet. So it would be 50.0 to 50.127, and that gives me that space of 126, like we figured out here, that we would have 126 usable hosts. All right, then once we have both sides filled in, we can slap in the middle. Now, technically, this is 180.100.0.0/25, and that would give us our 512 different networks, because we have 2 networks in each octet, or each binary of the third octet. So we've got 1 network in 50, 1 network in 50, 2 networks in 51, 2 networks in 52, and if we take 256, the total combinations of numbers there, and multiply it by 2, we would get our 512 networks. So if that part got confusing, again, you only see that when somebody needs a large number of networks, and the number of networks is going to exceed the amount of hosts. And again, we don't see that very often. Typically, it's franchisees and that kind of stuff. So again, your normal stuff will be like the first 2 ones that we worked through. Let me go back to that. And there'll be stuff like this. You'll get a normal Class B, and you're always going to be subnetting in the third octet. So even on subnettingquestions.com, you're going to see 172, 25, 121, 192, and then you get, oh, actually they did. They gave you one with yeah. All right, so we have 172, 25, 121.192 with a /26 subnet mask, and they want to know if this is my IP address, what is my broadcast? So let's kind of work this one out real quick. So first, we know that they've added 10 ones to the default subnet mask. So this is a Class B, and Class B is a /16. Now they have a /26, so they've added 10 ones. So we do our network formula. 2 to the 10 gives us 1024. Then we knock out our host formula. And then for the host formula, remember we have 32 bits in a subnet mask. If 26 of them are ones, then we know that 6 of them have to be zeros. So 2 to the 6 minus 2 gives us 62 usable hosts per network. All right, so once we have that, then we know that, get here, why are you not there? So 2 to the 6 gives me my range of 64. So my range is going to be 64, and we know we're working in the 4th octet because that's where the subnet mask takes us. So this would be 8, 8, 8 for 24, and then 2 bits are here are ones, and then the subnet mask, and then the other 6 bits are zeros. So this one's split up between 2 and 6. There are 2 ones and 6 zeros. So the zeros start in the 4th octet. So my range would be 64, so I would just do 0, 64, 128, 192, 256. And that gives me my left side. And then for my right side, I would do 63. Wow, that's terrible writing. 127, 191, and 255. So we know our address is going to be here. So based on this, if that was my address 192, we know that in the range chart, 193 to 254 would be usable. So they wanted the broadcast, so it would be 172.25.121.255. So let's see if that's right. Oh, where's my mouse? Oh, my mouse is stuck. All right. Woo. Yeah, pro tip, don't drop the pencil on the pad. Oh my gosh. All right, so if I go down here, let's reveal the answer, and boom. Where was my stuff? Yeah, 121, 255. So that works. So again, as long as you walk through that stuff, just apply your formulas. 2 to the x, x is the number of ones they add to the default subnet mask. 2 to the y, y is the number of zeros in the subnet mask. And then the range is 2 to the y without the -2. Remember, we -2 for one on the left side, one on the right side, the network ID, broadcast, and that's why we remove those 2 addresses from each range. And you're good. So if you have any questions, make sure you let me know. Other than that, have a great week, folks.